The maintenance shaft narrowed as Frank's team descended deeper into the Umbra Syndicate base. Toxic fumes hissed from rusted pipes. The air would have killed most alien species, even through their environmental suits. For humans, it was uncomfortable, but manageable. "Security checkpoint ahead," Greg whispered over the comm. His scanner showed 3 guards in a small room 30 feet below. Frank signaled to Kelly, who moved forward silently. The shaft opened slightly at a junction. Kelly braced herself against the walls and aimed her rifle downward. 3 quick shots, and the guards dropped without raising an alarm. "Clear," she said, her voice calm. They moved past the checkpoint into a wider tunnel. The gravity felt heavier here, closer to 1.4 times Earth normal. Their muscles strained against the pull, but years of training in variable gravity conditions had prepared them. "I'm picking up more human biosigns," Amy reported, studying her scanner. 2 levels down, at least 25 people. "And I'm detecting significant power usage in the same area," Ben added. "Some kind of lab setup." Frank checked his map. "We need to find out what they're doing with our people. Ben set charges at the power junction we passed. We may need a distraction later." Ben nodded and moved back up the tunnel while the others continued downward. They encountered 2 more guard posts, but avoided detection. Unlike the alien special forces that had attacked directly, the human team moved like ghosts through the facility. They reached a sealed door marked with alien symbols. "It says research," Greg translated, "and something about biological specimens." Frank's jaw tightened. "Get it open." Ben returned and worked on the door's security system. After a few minutes, it slid open with a soft hiss. The team entered, a dimly lit corridor lined with transparent cells. Inside each cell was a human, connected to strange machines. Some lay unconscious on tables. Others stood in tanks filled with colored liquid. All were alive, according to Amy's scanner, but many showed signs of experimentation. "What are they doing to them?" Kelly whispered, horror in her voice. A Draxian scientist appeared from a side room. Seeing the armed humans, he froze in shock. Before he could react, Greg was behind him, pressing a knife to the alien's throat. "Not a sound," Greg warned. "What are you doing to these people?" The Draxian trembled. "Research. Your kind can survive conditions that kill others. We're studying how to replicate this ability." "How many humans have you taken?" Frank demanded. 47, the scientist admitted. "From various outposts." Frank looked at the cells. "I only count 28 here." The Draxian's scaled skin paled. The others didn't survive the procedures. Amy was already moving among the cells, checking the captives' conditions. "Many are sedated but stable. Others are in critical condition. We need to get them out soon." "How many guards in this facility?" Frank asked the scientist. 30 security. Personnel, plus 10 Draxian elite soldiers who arrived yesterday. Frank exchanged glances with his team. The Draxian elites were notorious mercenaries, feared across several star systems. Their natural armor made them difficult to kill, and they were known for their brutality. "Where are these elites now?" Frank asked. "The upper level. They were brought in after the failed Union attack. The boss thought more might come." Greg checked his scanner. "I'm reading a large gathering 2 levels up. Could be them." Frank made his decision. "Amy, stay here and prep these people for evacuation. Ben, start setting charges throughout this level. We'll need to cover our escape. Kelly, Greg, you're with me. We're going to deal with those elites before they become a problem." As Amy began disconnecting prisoners from the machines, the others moved back into the tunnels. Frank led them upward, toward the concentration of enemies. They moved carefully but quickly. Time was running out. They reached a ventilation shaft that overlooked a large room. Below them, 9 large reptilian figures stood around a holographic display. The Draxian elites. Each stood over 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plates and additional combat gear. They carried energy weapons that could cut through solid metal. "I count 9, Kelly whispered. The scientist said 10. "Last one must be elsewhere," Frank replied. "We take them now, while they're grouped together." The plan was simple but effective. Ben placed a small charge on the ventilation cover. When it blew, Kelly would fire first, taking out as many as possible before they could react. Greg and Frank would drop down and engage any survivors at close range. The charge detonated with a sharp crack. As the ventilation cover fell, Kelly was already firing. 3 Draxians dropped before the others realized what was happening. Frank and Greg dropped into the room, landing hard in the high gravity but staying on their feet. 2 more Draxians fell to Kelly's precise shots from above. The remaining 4 turned to fight, energy weapons powering up with a high-pitched whine. Frank ducked behind a control console as energy beams sliced through the air where he had stood. Greg threw a flashbang grenade. The explosion temporarily blinded the Draxians, whose eyes were more sensitive than human ones. In that moment of confusion, Frank and Greg attacked from different directions. The fight was brutal, but brief. The Draxians were strong, their natural, armor deflecting some hits, but they were slow in the high gravity and unprepared for the speed and ferocity of human combat tactics. Within minutes, all 9 were down. "Where's the 10th?" Frank asked, checking the bodies to ensure none would get up again. The answer came in the form of an alarm blaring throughout the facility. "Our position is compromised," Greg said, checking his scanner. "Multiple hostiles converging on the research level." "Amy," Frank called over the comm. "Status?" "I've got most of the prisoners disconnected," she replied, the sound of gunfire in the background. "But we've got company. At least 15 guards and 1 very large Draxian." "The missing elite," Frank muttered. "Hold position. We're on our way." As they raced back down to the research level, Ben's voice came over the comm. "Colonel, I've set charges throughout the facility. Say the word and I can bring down key sections." "Not yet," Frank ordered. "We need to secure all the prisoners first." They reached the research level to find a battle in progress. Amy had barricaded herself and the freed prisoners behind overturned tables and equipment. She fired precisely at any guard who tried to advance. But the Draxian elite was directing the attack, staying protected behind his troops. Frank signaled to Kelly, who took up a position with a clear line of sight. Greg and Frank circled around to flank the attacking forces. Ben worked his way toward Amy to help with the prisoners. The Draxian elite roared orders to his troops. He was larger than the others they had faced, with ceremonial markings etched into his armor plates. A commander, not just a soldier. As the team moved into position, Frank realized something important. Despite their superior numbers, the Umbra forces were afraid. They advanced hesitantly, firing wildly rather than with precision. The stories about the failed alien special forces mission had obviously spread. "They fear us," Frank said over the comm. "Let's show them why." On his signal, they attacked from 3 directions at once. The guards, already unnerved, broke under the coordinated assault. Some fled, others surrendered. The Draxian commander fought to the end, taking 3 direct hits from Kelly's rifle before finally falling. As the last enemy fell, silence descended on the research level. Frank surveyed the scene. All the human prisoners were alive, though some would need serious medical attention. His entire team was intact, with only minor injuries. "Ben," Frank said, "now would be a good time for those charges. Set them for 10 minutes. That should give us enough time to reach the surface." As Ben activated the explosives, Greg accessed the facility's computer system. "Colonel, you might want to see this. They've been transmitting data about the human experiments to other Umbra bases." Frank looked at the display. "Can you redirect that transmission? Send their research data to Union intelligence instead?" Greg smiled. "Already done, along with the location of every Umbra facility mentioned in their database." They began moving the freed prisoners toward the surface, using the same maintenance tunnels they had entered through. The journey was slow with injured people, but they made steady progress. Just as they reached the surface, the charges detonated far below. The ground shook as sections of the underground facility collapsed. The storm had passed, leaving a toxic, yellow haze under a strange alien sun. Frank looked back at the smoking entrance to the facility, then at the rescued colonists and his team. One thing was certain: the galaxy would soon hear about what happened here, and the next time humans came calling, their enemies would know exactly what to expect. He just wasn't sure if that would make their job easier or much more difficult. 5 years passed since first contact. Humans had established small outposts across 3 star systems, but integration into galactic society remained slow. Earth was still viewed with caution by most alien species. The term Deathworlder had stuck, following humans wherever they went. Colonel Frank Peters stared at the holographic display showing the latest attack. This was the 3rd human outpost hit in 2 months. The projection showed the aftermath: buildings damaged, supplies stolen, and worst of all, 17 colonists missing. "The Umbra Syndicate," said Admiral Garcia, her face grim on the video. "All intelligence confirms it. They're targeting our people specifically." Frank nodded. The Umbra Syndicate was a criminal organization spanning multiple species, involved in everything from smuggling to slave trading. Until recently, they had shown little interest in humans. "Any idea why they're taking our people?" Frank asked. "Nothing concrete," Garcia replied. "But I want you to form a task force, find out what they're doing with our people and shut them down." Frank's first recruit was Sergeant Amy Donovan. She had been working as a combat medic on Europa Station, developing expertise in alien physiology. When Frank found her, she was elbow-deep in blue Caldaran blood, saving the life of a diplomat. "You want me to what?" Amy asked, when Frank explained the mission. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, face spattered with alien blood. "Join my task force. We need someone who understands alien biology." Amy finished suturing the unconscious diplomat. "The Umbra Syndicate, huh? I treated a survivor from one of their raids. Poor guy was in shock. Kept saying they were taking humans to harvest their strength." 2 weeks later, Frank's team had grown to include specialists from across human space. They gathered on the military station orbiting Mars, reviewing everything known about the Umbra Syndicate. "We've tracked their movements across 5 systems," said Lieutenant Greg Martinez, the team's intelligence officer. He pointed to a star map where red lines showed the Syndicate's activity. "All paths lead here. Cairo 7. The image shifted to show a planet wrapped in swirling yellow clouds. Data scrolled beside it, showing atmospheric composition and surface conditions. "That's a toxic hellhole," Amy said, studying the readings. "Gravity 1.3 times Earth normal. Atmosphere is mostly chlorine and sulfur compounds. Acid rain. Temperature swings of 80 degrees between day and night." "And that," Frank said, "is why they chose it. Most Galactic Union species couldn't survive there for more than minutes, even with protection. But we could," Greg added. "With the right gear, humans could operate there for hours." Frank nodded. "Exactly why we're going in." The planning took 3 more days. During this time, representatives from the Galactic Union arrived. A tall Caldaran military officer named Sentinel Xerix requested a meeting with Frank. "Colonel Peters," Xerix began, his blue skin shimmering under the station lights. "We understand you are planning an operation against the Umbra Syndicate." Frank crossed his arms. "That's classified information, Sentinel. The Union has been tracking the Syndicate for years," Xerix continued. "We have our own special forces, trained for such missions. We insist on handling this operation." Frank wanted to argue but knew the diplomatic implications. "Very well, but I want to observe the operation." Xerix agreed. 3 days later, Frank and Amy watched from a monitor room as the Alien Special Forces team landed on Cairo 7. The team consisted of 12 operatives from 3 different species, all wearing environmental suits that looked far more advanced than human gear. The operation went wrong almost immediately. The alien team moved slowly in the higher gravity. Their environmental systems struggled with the caustic atmosphere. When they reached the Syndicate base, a sprawling compound built into a cliff face, sensors detected them instantly. What followed was a slaughter. The aliens fought bravely but were outmatched. Their movements were sluggish, their tactics poor in the harsh conditions. Within 20 minutes, all 12 were dead or captured. Xerix watched the feed in horror. "Impossible," he whispered. "Those were our finest warriors." Frank turned to Amy, who nodded grimly. They both understood what had happened. The alien special forces, despite their advanced technology, were fighting in conditions their bodies were never meant to endure. "Sentinel," Frank said quietly, I'd like to propose an alternative approach. What could possibly succeed where our elites failed? Xerix asked. A human team. The Kaldaran stared at him. Your people? But you have no experience in interstellar combat. No, Frank agreed. But we have something better. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Kairos 7 is hostile, but it's not that different from some places on Earth. For 2 days, Xerix argued with his superiors. Finally, permission came through. Frank would lead a human-only mission to Kairos 7. The team Frank assembled was small, just 5 operators. Amy would go as medic, Greg for intelligence, 2 combat specialists, Corporal Ben Wright for demolitions and Specialist Kelly Adams as sniper. Frank would lead. Their gear was primitive compared to what the alien team had used. Human environmental suits were bulkier, less elegant. Their weapons were simpler, projectile-based rather than energy weapons. But every piece was rugged, tested, in extreme conditions and designed to keep working when everything went wrong. The aliens think we're underprepared, Amy said as they checked their equipment. Frank smiled. That's our advantage. They don't understand what humans are capable of. The drop onto Kairos 7 came during a violent storm that would have grounded any alien craft. The human shuttle bucked and shuddered but held together. They landed 5 miles from the Syndicate base, farther than planned but still workable. As they stepped onto the surface, acid rain pelted their suits. The gravity pulled at them, but after years of training in varying gravitational conditions, they adjusted quickly. The visibility was poor through the yellow haze, but their sensors cut through enough to navigate. Move out, Frank ordered. Stay tight. Watch for patrols. They encountered the first Syndicate guards 3 miles from the base. 2 Draxians, reptilian aliens known for their brutality, were operating a sensor station. Kelly took them both down silently with her rifle. Corporal Wright, what do you make of this? Frank asked, examining the sensor equipment. Ben studied it briefly. Basic motion detection, thermal imaging, nothing that would spot us if we're careful. They moved on, working their way closer to the base. The storm grew worse, visibility dropping to mere feet. For most species, this would have been a mission-ending development. For the humans, it was cover. As night fell, bringing a temperature drop of nearly 60 degrees, they reached the outer perimeter of the base. Unlike the alien Special Forces team that had approached directly, Frank's team circled around, identifying 3 possible entry points. We go in through the maintenance shaft, Frank decided. Small, heavily shielded from the environment. They'll expect anyone coming in to use the main entrance or the landing bay. The maintenance shaft was barely large enough for a human in an environmental suit. It descended at a steep angle into the cliff face, periodically releasing jets of toxic waste gas. Any species less hardy than humans would have been overcome. As they prepared to enter, Amy's scanner picked up biosigns from inside the base. Colonel, she said quietly, I'm reading at least 30 human life signs in there. Our missing colonists. Frank nodded grimly. Then we better not keep them waiting. In the command center of the Umbra Syndicate base, the alien leader received reports of unusual sensor ghosts at the perimeter. He dismissed them as storm interference. After all, no one could operate effectively in such conditions. The Galactic Union had already tried and failed. He did not know that humans were different. He did not know that the real nightmare was just beginning. And he certainly did not know that by the next dawn, the name human would take on a new and terrifying meaning in mercenary circles across the galaxy. 1 year after the Kairos 7 mission, stories about human combat abilities had spread throughout the galaxy. Frank sat in a bar on Europa Station, watching a news feed on the wall. The reporter was discussing the latest development in human-alien relations. For the 3rd time this month, a mercenary guild has refused a contract involving human interests, the reporter said. Sources within the Crimson Blade Guild cite unacceptable risk factors when explaining their decision. Frank smiled slightly and sipped his drink. Beside him, Amy scrolled through a datapad reviewing medical reports from the Kairos 7 survivors. Most of them have recovered fully, she said. A few still have nightmares, but physically they're fine. Frank nodded. Good. The bar door opened and Greg walked in. He looked different now. A long scar ran down the left side of his face, a souvenir from a mission Frank wasn't cleared to know about. "You've seen the news?" Greg asked, sliding into a seat. "About the mercenary guilds?" "Yeah." Greg lowered his voice. "It's not just what we did on Cairo 7, it's what happened after. That Draxian we captured, Zex Taral, has been talking." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Saying what?" "Everything. How we moved through toxic air that would kill most species. How we operated in high gravity as if it was nothing. How we took down their elites with minimal casualties." Greg leaned closer. "He's been quoted saying, 'They move through death like it's their home.'" Amy snorted. "Poetic for a lizard." "It's working in our favor," Greg continued. 3 human colonies were potential targets for raids last month. All 3 were removed from target lists after the mercenary guilds learned they had human security forces. The screen on the wall changed to show Admiral Diane Foster at a press conference. Frank turned to watch as she made an announcement that would change everything. "Today I am proud to announce the formation of the Human Deathworlder Special Forces, or HDSF," the Admiral said. "This new branch will specialize in operations in environments hostile to most Galactic Union species. The HDSF will work both independently and in cooperation with Union forces when appropriate." Frank, Amy, and Greg exchanged glances. They had known this was coming, but seeing it announced publicly was different. "They're putting a target on our backs," Amy said quietly. "The target was already there," Frank replied. "Now at least it's official." 2 months later, Frank stood in the Admiral's office on Mars Station. The view of the red planet's surface stretched out below them, dotted with the lights of the growing human colony. "We need your team, Colonel," Admiral Foster said. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Helios Station has been taken by Vargur extremists. They're holding 300 civilians hostage, including 50 humans." Frank studied the holographic display showing the station. Helios was a massive habitat in orbit around Saturn, a neutral trading post used by dozens of species. "The Vargur are canine-derived," he said. "Enhanced smell hearing. What's their demand? They want the Galactic Union to recognize their claim to the Proxima system. Not going to happen." Foster zoomed in on a section of the station. "The hostages are being held in the central hub. The Vargur have rigged explosive devices throughout the area. Standard approach would be impossible," Frank mused. "They'd smell or hear us coming." Foster nodded. "Exactly. The Union asked specifically for HDSF assistance. They've already lost 1 negotiator." Frank looked at another part of the station. Diagram. "What about the maintenance tunnels here near the reactor core? Radiation levels are beyond safe limits. The Vargur know no one can approach from that direction." Frank smiled slightly. "No one except humans." 48 hours later, Frank led a 6-person HDSF team through the radiation-flooded maintenance tunnels of Helios Station. Their suits provided some protection, but the radiation levels were still dangerous. For any other species, they would be quickly lethal. "Radiation at 300 rems and climbing," Ben reported, checking his meter. "We've got about 30 minutes before we need to worry." Frank nodded. 30 minutes in radiation that would kill most aliens in 30 seconds. Just another advantage of being a Deathworlder. They reached a sealed door leading to the station's central hub. Beyond it were the hostages and 12 Vargur extremists. According to intelligence, the leader, a scarred veteran named Karash, was particularly dangerous. "Kelly, you and Greg take the upper level," Frank ordered. "Ben, set charges on this door, but don't blow it yet. Amy, you'll handle any injured hostages. I'll lead the entry team." As they moved into position, Frank's comm unit beeped. It was Admiral Foster. "Colonel, be advised, there's a complication," she said, her voice tense. "The Galactic Union has placed observers on the security feed. They're watching your operation live." Frank frowned. "Why would they do that?" "Politics. Some species are concerned about the formation of the HDSF. They want to see what humans are capable of. So no pressure," Frank muttered. "Just get those hostages out, Colonel." The plan was precise. Ben's charges would blow the door. Simultaneously, Kelly and Greg would eliminate any Vargur on the upper level. Frank and the entry team would secure the hostages while Ben disarmed the explosives. In position, Kelly reported from above. Charges set, Ben confirmed. Frank took a deep breath. Execute. The door blew inward with a thunderous boom. Through the smoke, Frank led the entry team into the central hub. The Vargur reacted quickly, their superior hearing giving them some warning, but they were confused by the direction of the attack. No one was supposed to be able to come through the radiation zone. Frank moved with practiced efficiency. His first shots took down 2 Vargur guards near the hostages. Across the room, Kelly and Greg eliminated 3 more from their elevated position. The hostages huddled in the center of the room, terrified but unharmed. "Contact right," shouted one of Frank's team. A large Vargur with a scarred face, Karash, emerged from a side room, firing wildly. 2 shots hit Frank's armored chest plate, knocking him back but not penetrating. Frank returned fire, hitting the Vargur in the shoulder. Karash howled in pain and rage. "Impossible," he snarled. "The radiation should have killed you." "Deathworlders," Frank replied simply, and fired again. The operation was over in less than 5 minutes. All 12 Vargur were either dead or captured. Ben successfully disarmed the explosives. Amy began treating the few hostages who had suffered minor injuries during the brief firefight. As Frank secured the area, he noticed something on the wall, a small camera. The Galactic Union observers were watching everything. He gave a short nod to the camera, knowing the message it would send. 3 days later, the video of the HDSF operation was leaked to galactic media. Species across the Union watched in shock as humans moved through radiation zones that should have been instantly fatal, fought with precision in conditions that would cripple most aliens, and resolved a hostage situation that had been deemed impossible to solve through force. The political impact was immediate. Some Union species demanded restrictions on human military capabilities. Others sought closer alliances with Earth. But the most significant response came from the Mercenary guilds. Within a week, every major guild had implemented what became known as the Human Exclusion Clause in their contracts. Simply put, they would no longer accept jobs against human military targets, particularly HDSF units. As Frank watched these developments from his office on Mars, he received a message from Admiral Foster. It contained only 5 words. "They fear us." Good work. Frank wasn't so sure. Fear was a double-edged sword. It prevented some conflicts, but it could also lead to desperate measures. He suspected the real test of human special forces was yet to come. And somewhere in the galaxy, the surviving leaders of the Draxian Collective were planning exactly that test. Their best warriors had been humiliated on Cairo 7. Such an insult could not go unanswered. They would show the galaxy that even Deathworlders could die. The year was 2087 when the ships appeared in Earth's orbit. Massive and silent, they hung in the sky for 3 days before making contact. Humanity had prepared for this moment with equal parts hope and fear. What they hadn't prepared for was being classified as Deathworlders. Major Joe Campbell stood at the window of Mars Station, watching the alien delegates arrive. 6 years as a Navy SEAL had trained him for many things, but not for this. The red planet's thin atmosphere made the stars look sharper, clearer than they ever did on Earth. One of those stars had sent these visitors. "Major, they're ready for you," said Lieutenant Lisa Miller. Her uniform was pressed perfectly, not a wrinkle to be seen. As the intelligence specialist assigned to the diplomatic team, she took her role seriously. Joe nodded. "How many species are we looking at?" 7 different ones in this delegation. The tall blue ones are the Calderans. They're leading the talks. Lisa walked beside him down the corridor. "They think we're dangerous, you know." "Us? Dangerous?" Joe almost laughed. "Our planet is what they call a death world. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic elements, aggressive wildlife, natural disasters. Most intelligent species evolved on much gentler worlds." She checked her tablet. "By their standards, we're practically superhuman just for surviving on Earth." The meeting room fell silent as Joe and Lisa entered. The aliens were a colorful bunch. The Kaldaran stood nearly 7 feet tall with skin the color of deep ocean water. Beside them were the Viridians, short and stout with 4 arms and green, skin that seemed to shimmer. 3 other species Joe couldn't name sat at the large round table. Ambassador Patel nodded at Joe. Major Campbell, please join us. We were just discussing potential military cooperation. Joe took his seat, noticing how the Kaldaran representative leaned away slightly. As I was explaining, the blue alien said, voice melodious despite the translation device, humans may serve a valuable function in certain Galactic Union operations. Your natural resilience makes you suited for environments most species find challenging. Joe understood what wasn't being said. The alien saw humans as useful muscle, nothing more. We're happy to discuss cooperation, Joe replied, but we'd need to understand what kind of operations you're talking about. Lisa leaned closer to Joe. Something's wrong, she whispered. The Zeridian delegates changed their security rotation without informing station command. Before Joe could respond, the lights flickered. A moment later, the station's alarm began to wail. Station breach in Docking Bay 3, announced the calm voice of the station AI. Unknown hostiles. Security teams responding. The ambassador's face went pale. That's impossible. The bay is sealed for diplomatic vessels only. The Kaldaran representative stood quickly. This is most concerning. Perhaps we should... The doors to the meeting room slid open. 3 figures stood in the doorway, their bodies covered in battle armor unlike anything Joe had seen before. They were tall and spindly with 4 arms, Zeridians, but not the ones who had arrived with the delegation. Nobody move, one of them hissed through a translator. We represent the Free Zeridian Alliance. The tyranny of the Galactic Union ends today. Joe assessed the situation quickly. The intruders carried energy weapons and had positioned themselves to cover the entire room. The station's security team would be minutes away. What do you want? Ambassador Patel asked, her voice steady despite the circumstance. The humans have refused to join the Union. They will witness what happens to those who defy galactic order, the lead Zeridian said. Then they will be properly motivated to reconsider. Joe caught Lisa's eye and gave a small nod. She understood. Immediately. Mars station gravity is set at 40% Earth normal, Joe said loudly as if addressing the intruders. The oxygen mix is Earth standard. The aliens looked confused by this seemingly random information, but Joe wasn't talking to them. Lisa casually adjusted her watch. A moment later, the lights went out completely. Joe was moving before the emergency lights came on. In the reduced gravity, he launched himself across the table in a single bound. The lead Zeridian fired, but Joe was no longer where he had been. The beam hit the wall behind his former position. Joe slammed into the intruder with force that would have been impossible in Earth gravity. The alien's exoskeleton made a cracking sound as they both hit the floor. The second intruder turned to fire, but Lisa was already there. She struck the weapon with the edge of her hand, sending the shot wide. In the lower gravity, the alien's superior height was a disadvantage. Lisa used its momentum to flip it over her shoulder. The third intruder backed away, firing wildly. Joe rolled behind an overturned table, then used it as a springboard to launch himself at the ceiling. The alien didn't think to look up. Joe dropped down behind it and struck the junction where its neck and shoulders met. The entire fight lasted less than 30 seconds. As Joe secured the unconscious intruders with cable ties from his pocket, he became aware of the silence in the room. The alien delegates were staring at him and Lisa, with expressions that ranged from shock to horror. Are you both unharmed? The Kaldaran representative asked finally. We're fine, Lisa said, straightening her uniform. The station security team burst through the door a moment later, weapons drawn. Situation contained, Joe told them. 3 hostiles, all subdued. A small Viridian delegate approached Joe cautiously. You move like water in this gravity, it said. We were told humans had special forces, but to see such skills from regular, diplomatic security, Joe exchanged a glance with Lisa. We're not special forces, he said. I'm just a military liaison. Lieutenant Miller is an intelligence officer. The alien delegates murmured among themselves. The Kaldaran representative's skin had turned a lighter shade of blue. If you are not special forces, it said slowly. What are your special forces capable of? Joe smiled. Let's hope you never have to find out. Later, as the station security processed the intruders, Lisa joined Joe at the observation window. You realize what happened today, right? She asked. Joe nodded. They're afraid of us now. No, Lisa corrected. They're curious. Today they got a glimpse of what humans can do in reduced gravity with plenty of oxygen. Imagine their reaction if they saw our best working in environments we consider hostile. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Lisa watched as a shuttle carrying the Galactic Union delegates departed the station. I don't know yet, but one thing's certain. Humanity just earned a reputation we didn't ask for. On the shuttle, the Caldaran representative was sending an urgent message to its government. The report contained just one recommendation. Deathworlders must be studied. Their potential as allies or enemies cannot be overstated. And across the galaxy, word began to spread about the unusual species from the dangerous world called Earth. In the command chamber of their flagship, the Draxian collective leadership gathered around a holographic display. The image showed Mars colony, specifically its agricultural domes where Earth plants grew under the alien sky. This is where we strike, said War Chief Krastol. His scales were deep crimson marked with gold bands that signified his rank. Not at their soldiers, but at what they value most. The other Draxians hissed in approval. Their plan had taken 6 months to develop. They had spent fortunes bribing officials, gathering intelligence, and acquiring specialized equipment. The humans believe their families are safe, Krastol continued. We will show them they are wrong. When we are done, no human will dare oppose the collective again. On Mars colony, Lieutenant Ryan Parker walked through the agricultural dome, enjoying the smell of growing things. As an intelligence officer for HDSF, he rarely had time to visit peaceful places like this. His sister worked here as a botanist, and he had promised to visit during his leave. Ryan's comm unit chimed. It was an automated alert from an algorithm he had created to monitor unusual transmissions. Something was tripping sensors at the edge of the system. He found a quiet corner and accessed the data. What he saw made his blood run cold. Multiple ships were approaching Mars using stealth technology that partially masked their signatures. But Ryan recognized the pattern. Draxian vessels, military grade. Ryan immediately contacted Admiral Foster. How certain are you? She asked, her face grim on the small screen. 90%, Ryan replied. The approach vector suggests they're targeting the colony, not the military base. Foster's expression hardened. Time to arrival? Less than 3 hours. I'm initiating Omega Protocol, Foster said. Get to shelter and stay there. Ryan knew what Omega Protocol meant, the full deployment of all available HDSF units. He also knew he should follow orders and seek shelter. But his sister was somewhere in the agricultural domes, unaware of the danger. He made his choice. Understood, Admiral. Parker out. Instead of heading to the shelter, Ryan moved deeper into the agricultural dome, scanning for his sister. In orbit, around Earth, Frank was preparing for a training exercise when the alert came. Omega Protocol. In 6 years of service, he had never seen it activated. All HDSF personnel, this is Admiral Foster, came the broadcast. We have confirmed intelligence of an imminent Draxian attack on Mars colony. Their target appears to be civilian infrastructure. All units deploy immediately. This is not a drill. Within minutes, Frank's team was aboard a rapid response vessel, burning hard for Mars. Similar ships launched from bases across the solar system. The HDSF was converging from all directions. What do we know? Frank asked during the briefing. Admiral Foster's image flickered on the screen. Intelligence suggests this is a revenge attack from the Draxian collective. They've assembled their most elite force, the Crimson Guard. These aren't mercenaries. They're true believers. They won't run. Numbers? Amy asked from her medical station. At least 60 combat operatives backed by heavy weapons. They're targeting the agricultural dome specifically. Frank understood immediately. The domes weren't just food production, they were symbols of human adaptation to alien environments. They housed thousands of civilians, including families of HDSF personnel. "Our ETA is 40 minutes, Frank said. "Will we be first on scene?" Foster shook her head. "Lieutenant Parker was already there on leave. He's our eyes on the ground now." On Mars, Ryan moved through the increasingly panicked crowd. The colony's alert system had activated, directing civilians to shelter, but the agricultural domes were fast and evacuation was slow. He finally spotted his sister with a group of researchers. "Laura," he called, "you need to move now. Head for the emergency bunkers." She looked at him, instantly recognizing his tone. "What's happening?" "Draxian attack force inbound. I need you safe so I can do my job." After ensuring Laura was heading for shelter, Ryan took up position near the main entrance to the domes. His scanner showed the first Draxian ships entering Mars orbit. Colony defense systems engaged them, but some would get through. Ryan's comm crackled with a transmission from Frank's approaching vessel. "Lieutenant, what's your status?" "Evacuation is at 60%, Ryan reported. "But it's going to be close. I'm seeing landing craft breaking through the defense grid." "Hold position," Frank ordered. "We're coming in hot." The first Draxian landing craft touched down less than a mile from Ryan's position. The ship's doors opened and crimson-scaled warriors emerged. They wore advanced armor and carried heavy weapons. These weren't like the Draxians from Cairo 7. These were the elite of the elite. Ryan watched through his scope as they moved with surprising discipline toward the domes. He sent targeting data back to the approaching HDSF ships, then prepared for the worst. His sidearm would do little against Draxian armor, but he refused to retreat while civilians remained in danger. The Draxians reached the outer doors of the agricultural dome and placed explosive charges. Ryan counted down in his head. Then the doors blew inward with a thunderous roar. Civilians screamed as the Draxians entered. Weapons raised, Ryan took his first shot, aiming for a gap in one Draxian's armor. The alien staggered but didn't fall. Now they knew his position. "Come on, Frank," Ryan muttered. "Where are you guys?" As if in answer, the sky above the dome lit up. DSF drop pods punched through the thin Martian atmosphere, landing with precision around the perimeter of the dome. From each pod emerged black-armored human figures, HDSF operators from multiple teams, all converging on the threat. Frank's pod landed closest to Ryan's position. He emerged with Amy and Ben, weapons ready. "Lieutenant," Frank acknowledged. "Situation?" 20+ hostiles inside, Ryan reported. "They're moving toward the central hub where some civilians are still sheltering." Frank nodded. "Then that's where we're going." Inside the dome, the battle unfolded unlike anything the Draxians had anticipated. They had expected to face colonial security forces, lightly armed guards unprepared for serious combat. Instead, they found themselves hunted by black-armored ghosts who seemed to appear and disappear at will. HDSF teams used the dome's environment in ways the Draxians never imagined. They moved through irrigation tunnels too narrow for the larger aliens. They used the dense foliage for cover. They employed the dome's environmental systems as weapons, flooding sections with scorching steam or freezing mist. Krastul watched in growing horror as his elite warriors fell one by one. His forces still outnumbered the humans, but it didn't seem to matter. The HDSF operators fought with a savagery and precision he had never witnessed. "Pull back to position Alpha," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on Sector 3. But his troops were already in disarray. Some fought bravely to the end. Others broke and ran, only to be cut down by precise shots from human snipers positioned in the dome's upper levels. Frank led the final push toward the central hub. The remaining Draxians had retreated there, using the last civilian hostages as shields. "Surrender now," Frank called to them over an open channel. "You won't get another chance," Krastul's voice responded, filled with rage. "Deathworlders, you think you're invincible? You're just animals who evolved on a cruel planet." "You're right," Frank replied calmly. "We are animals from a cruel planet. That's why we're still alive, and your warriors are dead." What followed was not a battle but an execution. The HDSF teams attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. The remaining Draxians fought to the last, but the outcome was never in doubt. When it was over, Frank stood over Krasutul's body. The Draxian leader had fought better than most, killing 2 HDSF operators before finally falling. All hostiles eliminated, Frank reported to Admiral Foster. Dome secure, all civilians accounted for. 3 days later, the Galactic Union Council held an emergency session. The Draxian attack on a civilian colony had shocked most species. The speed and totality of the human response had terrified them. The Council voted unanimously to classify humans as a strategic asset species with special diplomatic status. No one said it openly, but everyone understood. The classification was as much to contain humans as to protect them. A month after the battle, Frank sat with Ryan in a memorial garden built inside the repaired agricultural dome. A simple stone monument listed the names of those who had died defending the colony. "I heard there's a new saying in the galactic underworld," Ryan said. "Accept any contract, face any enemy. But if humans in black arrive, you're already dead." Frank looked at the monument. "Is that a good thing, being feared?" "Fear keeps people alive sometimes," Ryan replied. "But it's not respect." Frank nodded slowly. "Maybe someday they'll respect us instead of fearing us. But until then, no mercenary wants to face Deathworlder special forces," Ryan finished. As they walked away, Frank thought about what he would tell the new HDSF recruits tomorrow. He had settled on an ancient human military philosophy that seemed more relevant than ever. It's not about being the strongest predator, it's about being the monster that even predators fear. And across the galaxy, that lesson was already being learned the hard way.